Welcome to Geopolitics and Empire. As always, support the podcast. You can become a paid subscriber on the Substack. We do off-the-record calls. I do a weekly analysis, and sometimes we bring back past podcast guests to do a live Q&A. You can also listen ad-free through the Substack, as well as on Apple subscriptions or Supercast, where you can listen without the ads. Joining us for the first time is Catherine, aka MellowKat of MellowKat.substack.com. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. And I just had to ask you how to pronounce your name. It's Hervoye.
You got it.
Great to be here. And as I said to you previously, I have not done my homework into who you are and what you're interested in, but I did a quick skim, and it looks like we cover and discuss very similar topics. So I don't know your whole take on all of these things, but you invited me on because something about what I'm doing, you said, I love your views or something along those lines. Let's talk. So what made you want me to come on your show?
Well, no, basically, yeah, we're on the same frequency. And, I see you chatting on, mentioning, the geoengineering stuff. So when I see the clips of you where you actually went out and did activism and confronted pilots who were geoengineering above your head. So I'm like, and I haven't covered that very often. Over a decade ago, I had on the podcast, I'm forgetting his name now. The guy who did the "What in the World Are We Spraying" documentary that was financed by J. Edward Griffin. I think it's Michael J. Murphy. I'm not mistaken.
I'm going to say Michael, but I didn't remember the last name. Yeah, yeah.
But I had him on, and we discussed that, and so I want to cover more geoengineering, and then I've seen you on podcast mention, give your take on COVID, which probably rhymes with my view, and the GMOs, and just so just basically to get your thoughts on where we're at. And so I don't know, maybe if we want to start with the geoengineering, or maybe just first to ask you, how did you sort of, because I've heard you on podcasts say, you were a normie, but as all of us were at some point, but then you fell down the rabbit hole. And so thoughts on, tell us a bit about that.
There are so many things I can talk about in this podcast. So if I go off on tangents, I always say this, bring me back in, because I think so rapidly. But I take it back to my whole life being a normie, just great childhood, free flowing, and just concerned about what's hot, what's not. When I was in my 20s, I lived in Los Angeles. I moved there when I was 24 years old. I had graduated from college with a bachelor's in media communications. I was hoping to be a journalist, so I was doing the teleprompter right out of college, and at a news station. And then I also got my massage license as a trade, because my mother, bless her heart, said, you should have a trade. Don't just have a degree, but get a trade. And so at the age of 20, I got my massage license. And so I was also doing massage in a local spa. And I was doing that for a few years, and it was 24. I learned about a private jet company that was hiring. They wanted me to come on as a flight spa trainer. So I had my license. And so I had never heard of the world of private jets before. And I took the gig and trained the gals in in-flight supplemental massage. Okay. Not Epstein massage, but hands, shoulders, neck. Right. And I did all the food and the service. And I launched into this incredible job. When you're in your 20s, I was suddenly traveling with celebrities and going all over the world. And I was in their intimate spaces, and I was putting my hands on them, which really opens people up. So I had just the time of my life until I met my husband and got pregnant. But I flew for years. I had a little detour for a while where I moved to Colorado. I was trying to start a business there with a friend relating to flight spa and training flight attendants around the world. That fell through. So I just decided, well, I'm going to go kick it in Aspen for a couple of years, for a winter. One winter, I thought I'll just go ski since I'm in Colorado. And I ended up staying for 2 years, because that's where life takes you sometimes. And I had a bevy of jobs out there just to make ends meet, because as you're probably aware, Aspen is incredibly expensive. So yeah, just a lot of adventures in my life. And it wasn't until I got pregnant that I stopped working, which suddenly freed me up. What are you going to do at 5 months pregnant? I'm suddenly home. And so I started watching documentaries. And my first passion really was to get back into animal advocacy, because I think I watched a few documentaries One was Earthlings, which is horrifying. It's about how we use animals for food, entertainment, clothing, fashion, experiments, right? You learn a little bit about the vaccines and all the things that they do to them that, for medicine. And so that was sort of I was coming back into myself, because I think for many years I was sort of just drifting along, having fun. And living in Los Angeles, it was all about where's the next party? What are we doing on Saturday? And who's who? And I was dating and I was single. And so it was really just this dramatic shift, meeting my husband and then getting pregnant. And suddenly my fast-paced, high-pressure world stopped. So I needed something to fill that, right? So I started filling that with information. And that was in, when did I stop flying? 2012, I think. Had my son in 2013. And this is really where things started to change for me, because as I've said before, when you're bringing life into the world, suddenly you're looking at everything in preparation for having this baby. And I was on a rapid learning adventure. Like, what is this? How do I give birth? How do women do this? What do I expect as I'm bringing life into the world? And I remember watching a film called The Business of Being Born. That was my first film, okay, that I watched, where I learned about how the medical system takes the mothers in, lies them on their back, pumps them full of drugs, often rushes you into a cesarean section. It's the turn and burn model, right? So I didn't know enough, because at this point I was getting further along in my pregnancy, and I thought, well, I want to do a home birth. And my husband, of course, was like, well, no, you shouldn't. I don't know what that's all about. That's too scary. So let's just do it here at a hospital 5 minutes away. And so I tried to set up a birth plan. I wasn't very confident and very strong in my knowledge at that time. I was still really fresh, right? Still really naive. And, but that was my first sort of, experience with the hospitals and learning about the hospital system. I had not explored vaccines at all. I absolutely believed in them. I got them for all my travels. In fact, as I look back, I think about all the shots that I got before a trip to Bali, and I was sick in Bali. Like the last day I was there, I was able to get out and do some shopping, but I was sick. But I didn't, whether or not it's associated, I don't know. But I remember I went to this little vaccine shop. It's where you can just go to get vaccines. And I had like 4 or 5. I was like, just get me anything that I need, and I'll take rabies, and I'll take all these other, so stupid. But I was that trusting, because so I really understand where people are coming from when they come from that locked mentality. It's so ingrained in us to trust medicine, and the white coats, and the doctors know what's best, and the veterinarians know what's best. And at this point in time, I have completely swung to the opposite side. I've learned too much. But that said, it was really bringing my son into this world that opened my eyes to even the pharmaceutical industry. I handed him over for everything. I did not know any better. And the reason I'm so outspoken today is because if there was one wish that I had, it would have been that anyone in my life would have said, hey, your baby's healthy. You're doing great. You don't have to go to every well visit, because those visits are actually mostly intended to keep you on the vaccine schedule.
Yeah, and if I could just add, I mean, and you've got more skin in the game now as a
yeah.
I've heard many people say that, folks that I listen to on the podcast, shout out to Matt Smith, was listening to him on Coffee on the Mic the other day, and he mentioned something to that extent. And I think we've all gone through this experience. When we had our first kid, we did go to a hospital. We were already no-vaxxers. I like to play with the semantics they throw at us. Anti-vaxxers. Yeah. I'm like, yeah. So we were already no-vaxxers, and we did it, birth and water in our way in the hospital, no injections. And then the second kid was like in the house. And it's crazy because, we pay like a grand and a half. And then you look at the prices, it's like in the US, like 20, 30, 40 grand for a birth. I'm like, what are you talking about? And then, and so we had and then we stopped, with after like the second well visit to the pediatrician, just what you said, we're like, oh, they just keep asking about injecting. I'm like, look, the kid is perfectly healthy. It's like, if the kid is sick, then you go to the doctor, but it's like, why do I got to keep coming and paying you for nothing? And so we just stopped going completely, and like, everything is fine. But,
You're so fortunate. You're so fortunate. Yeah. No, I'm just keep going. I just had to say, like, I envy you. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, I think also we shouldn't live with too much regret. Whatever happened. We're at where we're at. And now just move forward, and then yeah, maybe to ask you, when was it when you started then looking? Because I think once you go down, your eyes open as you're explaining on the one thing, then you start realizing everything else. And then when was it when you started kind of noticing they're spraying above you?
So let me just, before I jump into the spraying, let me also say that then I also learned about our body parts and how they are for sale. Your placenta is on the market. Your circumcised foreskin is on the market. It's sold in cosmetic products. It's used in other medical applications. So there's a market for your body parts, and not many of us are informed. So they're cutting the cord too soon. They're taking that valuable cord blood. They're taking the placenta and they are selling it. And what they're doing is they're injecting your placenta as stem cells. Okay. So this is happening. I'm aware of this in the medical world. My husband's an orthopedic surgeon. So he tells me about these things, and I'm very aware that I had not known. So anyway, so then you start to realize that this for-profit system, this medical system, they profit from you being ill. And they don't really care about your wellness. And so there's that. And then there's the revolving doors. And when you understand that with one section, like vaccines or even chemicals, right? Like Monsanto and the EPA, you've got, the CDC and the vaccine companies, it's revolving doors, right? People that are supposed to be protecting the public are actually serving the pharmaceutical industry. And there's no liability, as you know, for the vaccine manufacturers. So that said, once you sort of grasp that, I was then able to look at Convid when it came out in a very more critical way, because I'd already been challenged in these other ways. My son had some adverse, I realized were, progressive neurological issues. Okay. And so once you recognize that, then it was easier for me to look at Convid with an open set of eyes. And so we'll get into that later. But now, in terms of the spraying, what I discovered was simply because I was home and I wasn't on the go all the time. I was outside with my child. We were outside doing things and having adventures and lying on the grass and looking at everything, taking in the world. And I lived at the time in Fresno, and Fresno is big ag, lots of chemicals and lots of, so I was aware of that. But then watching the skies, and I said this many times, if you actually take the time to look up, how many people these days lie on their backs and look at the sky? Not many. Everyone's on their Black Mirror device, right? So when you actually just stop doing, if you just take a moment and observe, sit on your patio and look at the sky, and have a conversation, look up for once. And when you start doing that, it then becomes undeniable that something's happening up there. And so what I was noticing were grid patterns that would start in the morning. It would be like a blue sky morning, and then you'd see the first of a few lines that would just stretch across the entire sky. And then, and then they would all not dissipate and disappear. They would spread, the plume dispersion. Okay. And then it would be like a whiteout. It wasn't a blue sky anymore. And what struck me was, I would try to explain this to my husband, like it was blue sky today. And then, but when you're getting out of work at like 4 or 5, it's already sort of hazy, and you didn't get to see the day evolve. So that was sort of my first awakening into that, simply from observation. I'd never actually heard about chemtrails before. It took me, because it was so disconcerting for me to see it, I actually made a comment when I was at a health food store shopping, and I was checking out, and I said to the cashier, I said, do you see what's happening now? Do you see the lines in the sky and how and she said, oh yeah, those are chemtrails. And I was like, what? And she was like, they're chemtrails. And I was like, chemtrails? That was the first time. And I remember the name of the market. They're closed now. Lassen's Market. People will know if you live in Fresno, Lassen's Market. And she changed my life simply because she said that to me. And that then planted a little seed. And I went home and I started typing in chemtrails. And then lo and behold, you get led to somebody, right? Dane Wigington was what came up. And I'm not sure when I watched the dimming, because I lose track of time, but at some point I watched the dimming, and I mean, it was like, wow, this is happening. Like, what's going on here? And then you have Convid, right? So then all these little pieces of the puzzle start to come together. And that year, 2020 for me, was like an explosion in my brain. I was like, this is absurd. This is coordinated. This is calculated. This is forced. What the hell is going on? And it was happening globally. So I just thought, this is incredible. what is going on? It was really a surreal it's just surreal, Twilight Zone bizarre. And that was when I dove in even harder to everything. I wanted to know, what is this all about? I learned about 9/11 suddenly, right? So I'm watching endless documentaries. I'm talking to people that apparently were awake decades before I was, who were waiting for the day that I would notice, right? Friends that were like, oh yeah, we were awake to that back in, And so it was a whole new world. And so I had a friend say once, drinking from the fire hose. I was drinking from the fire hose for years. And it was really, it was mind and life altering, diving in like I was.
As it should be. And I'm sure many people listening can relate. And, I do want to get, I in March or April, I was calling COVID of 2020, I was calling COVID 1984. Someone actually sent me $20 on PayPal back then, because I had been the first they heard call Christ and COVID 1984. You may not know, but 2 years after that, the Department of Homeland Security banned me from PayPal, which that technically qualifies as political persecution, because America is the land of the brave, home of the free, right? All that. But yes. I wanted, before getting your bigger picture view, just on geoengineering alone, because I think you've done a lot of research and activism on that. And I'll insert the clip, but.
So this is the Modesto. Oh, I can't even see. Modesto Jet Center. Okay, great. He's out there right now. They're right here. Oh my God, that's them. Right here. Look at them in the building. They let me in. Hi. They're so confused.
Okay, well, you can talk to them about that for sure.
I know, but I want you to know, though, like, we are real people underneath what you're doing. You spray right over our houses. We hear you. We know you. We see you. We're watching your planes and your patterns, okay?
Yeah.
It's twice today now. You did 2 flights. 2 3-hour flights.
It's public knowledge, yeah.
It's not really, though. That's the problem. So you have not properly notified our Board of Supervisors about this. Hi, are you the other pilot?
Yes.
Hi. What's your name?
Khaled.
Khaled?
Yes.
Yeah,
okay, hi.
Hi.
It's not we have people at home base that you can talk to about that stuff.
But they've not called back. So now we're getting to the point where we're getting our supervisors involved. So the supervisors of our county needs to be notified. They've not been notified. You've been doing this for 30 years. I know it's a long time. You guys are like, it's cool, it's easy. We're talking about all of the metals and the flares that you're using. So aluminum and zinc propel the silver iodide. You're spraying right over us all the time. And our plant life is suffering. They are now selling aluminum, genetically modified seeds to grow food because our soil is so contaminated. Okay, so what you're spraying is not good for the environment, and it's not good for the people, because there's an early onset dementia, there's Alzheimer's, things are starting to happen to people's health. And I really do believe there's a linkage to what we're breathing in the environment every day.
What has your research led you to conclude what's really going on there? I think from looking at some of your stuff, you conclude it's mostly commercial planes that are spraying?
No, we'll talk about that.
Okay.
So let me just say this, that when I first started observing the lines in the sky, it was such a taboo topic. It was so I was so made fun of when I posted it on Facebook at the time, which I'm no longer on Facebook. That's a Rothschild engineer founded it with, it's a military thing. But I remember just the backlash when I made a post. And back then I was just exploring, but I was so lambasted for even you're so stupid. How could you, you're so dumb. These are just, then I pulled away, but I kept observing and I kept learning. And then I got into the vaccine stuff because that was affecting me personally. And so, and then 2020, I was dealing with having a child and not wanting to mask him, test him, any of that stuff. And I was watching all these poor children go through that hell that they went through. So I didn't really heavily pursue the geoengineering until after I went through what I did with COVID and standing up and resisting and saying no and getting, having police call. I mean, I was a non-compliant one, okay? There were a lot of freedom-minded people that complied to get by. I was not one of them. I was so beside myself I just did not want to participate in the circus, and I refused. And I got a lot of kickback for that. I was followed home a few times. I would go to these freedom gatherings, and I was very outspoken, and I was hosting protests. And so I started getting harassment. In fact, I got doxxed, which is where people will, put out the worst of the worst about you and try to paint you as a creep or a moron. And they're trying to ruin your life, right? And so I've experienced that. I've had enough. I don't mind being the black sheep. I'm very content being on my own. I traveled for years, essentially by myself, because it was me and a couple of pilots. The pilots would hang out by themselves. So for years, I self-entertained. I walked around new and strange places by myself, meeting people. So I'm okay with being alone. I don't need to be fit in with the crowd. It's not a safety thing for me to go along to get along. So
just on that point, I just want to accentuate that it comes to mind, this idea of resilience, which I think is one big factor for people who wake up because they step out into the unknown, away from the group, and you need that resilience where people of weaker, they can't leave the comfort and security of the group, and that's speaking physically, mentally, economically, and I just thought what you were describing, I'm like that. I'm so happy to. I love hanging out. I can be social, but I love also just staying by myself and reading books. And I traveled the world. I've lived in 6 countries, and I'd also make it a point just to walk around town by myself. And so, but yeah.
And meet people. Well, I'm the same way. So I'm very social too. I can go out and have a great time with people, right? I mean, but then I also really love my own time. I have so much happening in my mind. I have so much happening at home that I don't need to be a socialite. But so after I got through some of those years, then I really so it was actually what really got me into this. So I was tracking flights, actually. I started tracking flights, not just for geoengineering, but also because I was hosting so many protests, and I became aware that the FBI would use shell companies and little aircraft to surveil people. So I was mostly searching for that. And then it comes in handy for the other stuff too. But that's sort of when I start, and then my son loved it because he loves planes, trains, automobiles. And so he and I would look at the planes together, and we started learning how to identify who was, what was what. And I discovered that there's a whole world of things happening in the sky that many of us are not aware of. I learned about surveillance blimps, Navy surveillance blimps being used under a private company, which is how they can get away with surveilling you. Because my husband said the military can't surveil its citizens, but they can do it under the private company, right? So this naval blimp flew over, and I remember landed in it was like the Moffett airfield or something. And I was like, what is it doing? So things like that. I learned about the high altitude balloons, Project Loon, which was an Alphabet Inc. or Google project. Okay. So we've had these high altitude balloons, for internet. Then there was I think it's called Gentrix. It's been a while since I wrote about this. This is what they used for surveillance back in the day. Was it Project Genetrix? Genetrix. If you look that up, they've been using these high altitude balloons for all sorts of recon, okay? And you'll find that now that even today, they have Raven, Aerostar Defense, they've got all sorts of high altitude balloons collecting information. And some might say, this might be a stretch for some of your viewers, that our satellites are not actually orbiting in space, but they are actually tethered to high altitude balloons, which are at 70,000 feet, okay? So food for thought. Okay, that's just, I'm going to put that out there. That might be a stretch, but I would look, there's some interesting videos out there you can watch where people have talked about satelloons is what they're called. Anyway, so I got into watching flights, and I learned how to look up the players. And it was actually years later, we relocated to the mountains finally after Convid. And I was starting a garden because I was recognizing more and more that our food is making us sick, that the medical industry doesn't care about you. There's fluoride in the water, and dentists are still recommending it and giving it to you every visit, right? So, and it was all just, I realized we live in a toxic world, and now I want to get away from it. And I want to start growing my own food. I want to try gardening. And so it was while I was gardening in the mountains, in this really quiet, peaceful space, I was observing the same lines in the sky. And that's when it came back to me. I'm like, I can't escape that, right? I can't escape the city and the surveillance camera rollouts, right? The flock cameras, all of that garbage. But when I'm out here, I think that I've escaped that world, that prison. and I'm being suffocated by the same shit in the sky. So I decided, and I'd been told years ago, like, don't talk about chemtrails because you're going to be like, you're so knowledgeable about the vaccines and the harms and everything else that they're not going to listen to you, right? And I still hear that today with other topics that I'm exploring that I'm not decided on, but like I'll be exploring a topic and people are like, oh God, don't go there or they'll cut you off, right? And I'm like, everything should be on the table at this point. There's no harm in exploring every single possibility and having it all on the table because we simply don't know at this point. It's so convoluted. It's been just generations and generations of lies and manipulation and harms. It's okay for me to explore the craziest, fringiest ideas, okay? Fringiest ideas. So this is where I really started to get into it because then I wanted to find out who's doing what. And I started a Telegram channel and I called it California Chemtrails. By the way, I've said this before, it's really important. If you're trying to reach your elected representatives or you're trying to have a conversation with a normie, you do not want to say chemtrails, chemtrails, chemtrails. You just don't want to do it. I use it because in my community of people that get it, it's easier than saying geoengineering or solar radiation modification or stratospheric aerosol injection or marine cloud brightening or, sunlight reflection methods. It's just one quick word, chemtrails, boom. And we know what we're talking about. But if you are trying to reach people that have not yet, I guess chemtrails woke me up, the word chemtrails, but I'm just saying if you really want to reach people and make this a serious topic, if you use the correct terminology when they're doing research, they'll find that there are news articles talking about it, that there are documents that exist on it, that we've done weather modification in the past, right, for many, many, many decades, right? I mean, some would say a lot longer than what I'm aware of. I'm aware of Popeye during the Vietnam War, right? I mean, our military has been using weather modification. I mean, why not? If you can control the weather, you can starve a country of water, right? You can flood a country. You can create conditions that exacerbate fires. If you throw a little, that's what they did in Vietnam. They sprayed everything with glyphosate and other chemicals, right? I don't know if it's glyphosate. There's a lot of chemicals. Then they would drop little fire cluster bombs, whatever and just to light the fire when the wind was right. They'd use wildfire as warfare. I mean, they'll do anything to have control. And as we know, I think it was Lyndon B. Johnson, when, he who owns the weather owns, can control the world. Don't quote me there, but it was, Dane Wigington plays it at the beginning of every single weekly episode that he does.
And then just on that point, when I taught U.S. foreign policy at university, we taught, I had to cover the curriculum of Vietnam, and I talked about the weather modification in Vietnam. And as we speak, this is old news, as I call it, but Daily Mail and others are publishing just yesterday, CIA accused of poisoning the sky with toxins as files expose secret weather control agenda. And just to your point, I sometimes have issues with fellow, either, people in the podcast space or, listeners and folks who, I use the term couth. As you're saying, like, you kind of have to have a somewhat academic approach and framing initially. And this is me being a former, teacher at high school teacher, university professor, is that people are just going to roll their eyes if you use this, our internal lingo. And so you kind of have to frame it with, as you say, using mainstream. There's enough stuff out there already that's mainstream that you don't have to say, as you say, chemtrails. If they get past, step one, then they'll start using chemtrails. But until then,
And it's funny, I find, so I like to rant and pipe off with my internal kind of lingo, right? I do that because I have to release steam. I think we all have to have a release, right? Some people choose to work out, others drink. I sometimes like to drop F-bombs and say this and that, and the worst things that that I'm feeling. And, but that's never going to be the way I reach anybody. So as much as I rant in my personal space or with my notes on my platform, sometimes I'll make a video because I'm hot about something, and I'll be like this and this, and I'll say damn it, and I'll use bad words and I'll vent, and it's a great release for me to do that. But if I was ever face to face with someone, like my pilot confrontation, I am going to be calm and I want to try to reach you. And that's how I am when I'm at my board of supervisors meetings. I go in and I leave a comment and I'm respectful. Right? So when I have dialogue with someone and I'm genuinely trying to reach them, I'm not going to curse and wave my hands around like maybe I want to in my private time, and maybe I want to punch the air, So I mean, you have to know who your audience is and who you're talking to and what kind of effect do you want to have on them. So yeah. So my point is I started the California Chemtrail channel. So to get past the word chemtrail, my goal was I wanted to normalize talking about it because I was tired of it being a taboo topic. It was taboo back in even 2022. People didn't really want to talk about it on social media. Now look around you. Look what's happening. It's like the topic du jour. Everybody's talking about it now, and now states are recognizing it, and the EPA is recognizing it, and it's a global conversation, which is fantastic. But my goal was I wanted people to start sharing their photos. I'm in the mountains, folks. Here's what I see today. What are you looking at over there on the coast? And I was inspired by Dane to test my own rain. And so then I had to learn, okay, how do I do this? How do I do this? And Nikki Florio, she has beheroic.com, I think, or .org. I'm not sure if it's org or com. BEE, like she cares about the bees. She's been fighting this for decades, I think. She recommended a lab called McCampbell Analytical Inc. out of California. And so I gave them a call. And my very first step was to say, hi, I'd like to test some water. I didn't want to give away that I was checking for elements from the aircraft or whatever it was. I just said, I want to test some water for metals. How do I do that? And that's when they told me, here's what you can do. And you need to collect this much. And then you submit it like this, you label it. And would you like a chain of custody form where you fill out like where it was collected, what time it was collected, when you sent it off, who received it, right? So I did all those things. And I then started testing my rain, which then led to, I had heavy metals in my rain. Okay, so I picked an assortment, like this whole group of metals. They had a package of all these certain metals, and then I added a few more that I had heard were in these chemtrails, okay, metal trails. And I found that I had them in my rain. Then began the research into, okay, what do these numbers mean? What are the other emissions that I might need to rule out? Are there factories that release these things? Are there, what else could there be? So then I first started out by trying to research what are the known limits, like safety limits for breathing and ingesting this amount of metal, right? So then I'm looking at studies, and there's like 300-page studies for aluminum. And then there's this many, all these studies where and our limits here in this country are very different from the limits in Europe or in Sweden, right? Or, Switzerland. So, and how our EPA sets everything so high, right? Like the threshold of like, oh, now it's the max contaminant level for this, or that's, we want to, they allow so much toxicity in our lives before they say that's enough. But other countries are a lot more restrictive. So then was the journey of trying to figure out what's normal, what's not, where is it coming from? So then I contacted my local air pollution control district. They stonewalled me. So then I brought it to the attention of my supervisors, my county supervisors. And I said, listen, I'm testing my rain and I'm getting some metals in my rain. And I want to know why. And I want to get in touch. I want to figure this out. Like, don't you care what's in your water? I mean, if this is coming down in the rain, it's ending up in our food and our water supply. Well, one of my personal supervisor at the time took an interest in it. And so she reached out to the Air Pollution Control District, APD, I'm just going to say APCD, and finally got in touch with the woman. And it turned out the woman was juggling like 3 different positions. So she was doing agriculture, she was doing the air, she was doing something else. So she wasn't even really, not just focused on one thing. And so her answer was, well, we don't test for that stuff. We just test for particulate and ozone. And really it's this district that does it. And so then I had to talk through my supervisor mostly. And then the woman didn't want to talk to me. I had to call and pretend I was somebody else just to get her on the phone, because every time I called, she was in a meeting, right? Because she'd stonewalled me and I called her out for it. So finally I got her and I said, I need you to put me in touch with the California Air and Resources Board, because they're also not answering my emails or calls. So she did. So this is what you have to do. You have to stay on these people too, because they just want to brush you off and hope that you're going to go away if you're ignored long enough, right? So then I got into this lengthy conversation with a gentleman for about a year. And he finally retired, and then all those conversations disappeared because he actually started to take an interest in it as well. But he said, well, we don't test for those metals. And I said, well, why not? And he said, well, we only test when we're aware of an emission of concern. Well, around this time, I also learned, because I was doing research, through the chemtrail chat. And by the way, if you need to ask questions or get clarification, just ask me. But through the chemtrail chat, I learned about the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA. You'll hear NOAA. And they have a weather modification library. So you can go into that and you can type in your county, or you can type in a big lake near you, because the names, or you can just go through the 1,000+ entries. Okay. There's 1,000 entries or so. I haven't checked it in a while, but you can just tap on those or look and see if there's a familiar name. Sometimes it's, it's not readily available for you to find out what's happening in your county unless you get the name right. But I discovered there was, it was called the Upper Tuolumne Weather Modification Project. And I live in Tuolumne County. So I learned that they had been, you get to see who's involved. And it was the Turlock and Modesto Irrigation District had hired Weather Modification International, or Inc., or LLC. They use all three interchangeably. And I got to see the names on the contract. So Jody Fisher was one name, and he works with Weather Modification International. And then it was Jason Carkeet, I believe, was the name on the other for TID. So I called both, to try to get answers. I called Weather Modification International multiple times. They never got back to me. But I called and talked to a man named Wes at TID, which is the Turlock Modesto Irrigation District. And he admitted to me that they had been seeding, cloud seeding now, okay? Not the same as solar radiation modification, not the same as stratospheric aerosol injection, just it's different, but it's weather modification in my county. So then I'm learning about this 30+ year cloud seeding arrangement that's been happening over our heads. And I had the map of where they were doing it, and the map of where they would spray is right over my home, right? And other areas. And it's benefiting their irrigation district. They are a water and power company, and they are to the, geographically challenged, I want to say the southwest of us, okay? So I then started diving into that. And then I started asking, well, what's in the flares? And when you start realizing that that with cloud seeding, everyone acts like it's so benign. Like, news has been coming out for the last 4 years now, like, cloud seeding, we love cloud seeding. It's really what could help us beat the drought. And I'm like, wait a minute, you've already been doing it for 35 years. Why are you acting like this is a new innovation here? And they're like, oh, it's silver iodide. It's just a little bit of silver. And we have silver already in the environment. It's not just silver. Come to find out, most flares they have burn-in-place flares attached to the aircraft, smaller aircraft, or they have ejectable flares. You push buttons and poof, it just explodes, into the, out in the environment. And come to find out that they require aluminum and zinc powders. And like 70% of the flares are comprised of aluminum and zinc powders. And that acts as the propellant to disperse the cloud seeding material, which is the silver iodide. Some of them use titanium dioxide nanoparticles. They're using all sorts of things trying to figure out which is the best way to attract condensation, right? But what struck me is, then I started researching, what is it to breathe in aluminum? And come to find out, if you're breathing in aluminum nanoparticulate, it's more bioavailable to your body than if you were to eat or drink it. Now, that was in some study that I read, but it's like 6 or 7 times more bioavailable inhaling it versus ingesting it. So all these things to think about, right? But let me get back to my conversation.
Just on that point, I mean, when I learned about big pharma and moved into natural health and all that stuff, and then you start taking vitamins, and then I started to notice I've gotten to a point where I'm not even taking generally vitamins.
No, I know.
And I don't know if it was you that posted it or Unbecoming. I've also been interviewed by them, the Substack, and they did a great piece, because if you think of big pharma, Rockefeller Medicine, all that, the synthetic oils that are then reused in vitamins, and a lot of the vitamins like A, B, C, D. I'll take supplements that are natural, just the pulverized turmeric or plant, but like mushroom. What do I have? Like oregano, olive. What do you call it? Olive leaf. But I noticed, because you mentioned titanium dioxide, and I noticed I would actually start feeling bad after taking certain vitamins that had titanium dioxide and other things in there. And I'm like, why do I have to take titanium dioxide? That doesn't sound like something that should be in my body. And so just any thought on that?
No, well, then same evolution. So I also stopped taking vitamins probably 2.5 years ago now. It's been a while, but same thing. You realize who owns the vitamin companies, right? These little brands that you find in your Whole Food store, or your little Depot store that's all natural, organic. And these companies are owned by mega corporations or these investment capital firms, and I went, ooh, I'm getting out of here, So there are people out there. Did you interview Unbecoming? I'd like to see that at some point, but there are people out there.
Unbecoming, as far as I know, there's just a subset.
Medicine Girl is another gal who's written a lot. She's just been throwing every supplement under the bus, and she's telling you why. I mean, and I'm open, it pisses a lot of people off because we want our solutions, right? We want to feel like what we're taking is good for us and it's going to make us healthy and protect us. But I think at this point, we have to understand the level of deceit, right? They want us sick and not functioning. And in a documentary I recently watched, I didn't know this, but apparently caffeine, well, I knew it was a vasoconstrictor, but everyone thinks caffeine makes you so alert. And I guess maybe in some cases it does, but it actually restricts the amount of oxygen that goes to your brain. Now, I've not dived into this in depth, but it's a vasoconstrictor. And I thought, and coffee is in every single movie you'll see, right? Everyone's drinking coffee, and then booze,
have you been listening to Jason Christoff?
This was his documentary. And I think it was called, I don't remember the title, but I can put a link later. I just watched it and I went, oh, I never thought about coffee. Obviously, I've been noticing subliminal messaging and outright just positioning of product placement in movies for a while, right? But I hadn't thought about coffee, which I drink every day. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting. Luckily, it hasn't taken me out yet. But they want you sort of foggy and unable to really function and think critically, right? And so, yeah, I stopped the supplements as well. But I want to make sure I get back to where I was. I wanted to say what I've discovered is these regulatory agencies, like the California Air and Resources Board, I'm going to jump right back to where I was because I wanted to come back. They don't know what's going on. They don't know up from down. They're not aware of anything. I found that they were all they were cared about was being carbon neutral, right, by 2030. They have papers on this. They're focused on that. Working groups thinking about this. But nobody's paying attention to the impacts of these decades-old cloud seeding operations. And nobody's measuring the cumulative impact of the metals, all of the metals involved in cloud seeding. And the unfortunate thing is that you'll find environmental impact reports will only mention a salt or a silver, but they won't talk about the propellants that get those into the environment. It's like they completely neglect to tell you that, oh yeah, by the way, with the silver, there's also aluminum powder and zinc powder. Enjoy drinking that, my friends, right? So none of it is benign, is my argument. Because when people try to say, well, cloud seeding is not a big deal, they've been doing it forever. Well, yeah, have you tested your soil or your food? Have you looked at your own tap water? So these are the things we have to start thinking about. And yeah.
I got two questions. So number one, you brought up, which I think is an important point, where again, people in the conspiracy consumer community, they often, I think, jump the gun and get a little too clownish or cartoonish to say, I just shared something on my Telegram and someone said, oh, that's CIA. And it's like, look, it's more, I think, nuanced. It's a gray zone. So just to get your thought, when you talk about the system and people who work in the government, I think, easily half of the people don't even know what's going on or don't have the full picture. And of course, there are a handful in key positions that probably do know, but there's a large body of the system and it's compartmentalized, like what the CIA does within its own agency or any military does. You're on a need to know basis. So just on that, would you agree that a lot of people who work in government or even certain corporations don't even know?
100%. Yes, I met a woman that worked for the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, right? Their nonprofit or foundation, and I know what I think about Zuckerberg, right? It's like, right? How could you work for him? But it's good people get sucked into organizations where they're facilitating some of the dirtier stuff, and they don't know it. So absolutely, that's why. So I have I've been talking to friends about this out here. It's so easy for us to look at I go down to the local level, your county supervisors, your decision makers. It's so easy for them to make decisions for you to say, oh, I hate that, you suck. And then you go back to your life and you're living your life. You get to go to little Joey's baseball game. You get to go to little Susie's thing over here, and you're drinking your lattes. But they're the ones going to all the meetings, and they're inundated with so much shit coming down the pipeline. What they really need from us is your help. If you are passionate about something and you're aware of something that's coming down the pipeline, it's on you to bring it to their attention. Whether you call them, you go into for a meeting with them, you make a comment at a board meeting. Because what I found is my supervisors are receptive, not always, not all of them, but sometimes you'll find that they didn't know and they're interested. And then they thank you for sharing the information, right? I shared the International Bird Flu Summit with one of my supervisors saying, watch out for this. They're going to try to pull something on us again, like Convid. So you be prepared for this. They have a summit happening here. They're looking for the next pandemic. And the reply was, thank you so much. This is exactly what I need, was to see evidence of these steps, right? These plans, right? I mean, they tell us what's coming down the pipeline when you look at scenarios, right? There was the monkeypox. The monkeypox scenario was I have it printed. It's here somewhere. The name was complicated, but it was some roundtable discussion about monkeypox coming out by May of 2023. And then here's the steps of how it unfolds. And this is like a year before it actually happened. And then boom, it happens. And I'm like, they planned this, folks. Here's the proof. And so when you can show people that they're planning things and sharing their timelines, even if the timelines aren't perfect, but they're literally orchestrating every catastrophe that they, yes. Well, it wasn't Pegasus though.
No. I just wanted. So I was looking at this morning. I wanted to just show this because I knew in our conversation this would come up, and my mind is boggled. And so in November of last year, so we're talking half a year ago, less. UK Health Security Agency. So the UK ran, and it says here, their largest simulation of a pandemic ever in UK history. This is November 2025, and it was based on a novel enterovirus. And it says, which can lead to serious conditions such as meningitis. Now let's fast forward. I just posted this this morning. You've got the UK Health Secretary. This is probably from like just a few days ago, who says, we're now running a vaccination program to immediately target for meningitis vaccines. And so I just want to play the 30-second clip where the guy actually.
Please do.
I got to turn off my. I noticed you said on your Substack you listen to stuff on 2x, and I do as well, and so 2x and 3x. But it's 30-second clip. Here's a guy talking.
I can confirm to the House that we will begin a targeted vaccination programme for students living in halls of residence at the University of Kent in Canterbury, which will begin in the coming days. UKHSA will provide further advice on other cohorts in the coming days. On the question of wider eligibility, we obviously follow the expert independent advice of the JCVI. In light of this latest outbreak, I will be asking them to re-examine eligibility for meningitis vaccine.
So we have a simulation by the government, fake simulation, and then they roll out the actual active, measure. So that's just wild.
And what I picked up there too is in one of the things they said, acute flaccid paralysis. Let me tell you, for those who don't know, you probably know this, you have to look into, I don't know if this is in her book, Dissolving Illusions, Dr. Suzanne Humphreys, but when they rolled out the oral polio vaccine in India, there were 3 attenuated, which means weakened strains of whatever the wild virus was. Now, I'm going to get kicked back when people are like, viruses don't exist. Well, whatever it was, poison, whatever you want to call it, chemicals, poison, whatever, bacteria, whatever. But what happened was children were getting acute flaccid paralysis despite having the oral polio vaccines. So what they did was they relabeled it. They called it non-polio acute flaccid paralysis. So as the rate of wild polio cases went down, and they called their vaccination campaign a success, the rate of non-polio acute flaccid paralysis skyrocketed. So it's just relabeling it. There were still cases of some paralysis, but it wasn't polio anymore. It was non-polio acute. So They're so full of shit. And listen, he's like, we talk to the experts. That's what they're always going to tell you. We talk to the experts. And I tell you, it really is programming that people are watching. I don't know why I didn't fall for this crap. And it could be because I stopped watching TV when I was traveling so much, because when you're on a long 21-day trip and you're in a foreign country, you get the BBC on repeat. And once you've watched it on repeat, you're like, I'm going to go out and do something else, right? So I finally, I remember coming home one day, and I went to my girlfriend's house. It was like the girls get together, and we used to watch things like the Kardashians and the Desperate Housewives. Okay. It was like, we had fun doing that. And I'll never forget, I had missed this new season of the Housewives, and I was gone so much. And I finally went to a girls get together, and they had it on in the background, and it struck me. This is just women screaming. It's awful. It's just awful. And I hadn't bonded with any of the characters, right? This was like it's just trash, right? I got off of TV years ago. It was not 10 years ago now. It's been like maybe, when did I stop? I mean, I've been off of TV for years and years. Right?
Same here. Like when I woke up, I smashed the TV, like not figuratively, but this is, I left out into the world in the 2000s. And then, when I came into Mexico, 2010, we do not have a television in our home.
I love that.
We don't have a screen. So
I love it. Well, we do. My husband, when we met, I was not who I am today. So that's been a whole other ball of wax, navigating a marriage where one spouse is rapidly awakening to some things and the other one's still content with the good old, none of that affects our lives. It's not a big deal. Just wear the mask to get by. And so that was a whole interesting experience there, but I'll tell you, we got through it. And it's been what a journey, what a crazy, trippy, surreal world that we live in, don't we?
And I do want to get back though for a second to the geoengineering, and you mentioned the your activism, and we can understand from an economic standpoint. So that's one reason that they're putting all these metals and chemicals for economic benefit, whether it's agriculture or whatever. Do you think beyond just pure, corporate greed, economics, are there other? Well, then we have the military. We had on our geoengineering age.
They're great.
Folks,
Rob Williams.
I met him wasn't it last year or 2 years ago? Time flies. And so we sat down and did the interview, and he had this great citation from The Guardian, which said, okay, so we said, one has corporate economic benefits. The other is it's a weapon. You already talked about that, military weapon. Many countries are deploying these technologies. But beyond that, I always point the finger. I go back to DARPA. Just the other day, I was kind of tongue-in-cheek joking, but it's true, because now they're bringing in identity verification for operating systems, Linux, Windows, Mac. And I'm like, well, I'm joking, but I'm serious. DARPA created the internet. They created the personal computer effectively. And they created Facebook was a DARPA project.
Yes.
X was Amazon, I'm sure was DARPA. And so it's like, well, if they created the internet that we're using and the computers that we're using to use the internet, I guess they can then demand identity verification, because they're the ones who created it all. I'm totally against that, of course. But where am I going with this? DARPA, I feel like, is one of the big brains behind the move towards this transhumanist technocratic world government. Do you think, in terms of cloud seeding, weather manipulation, are there any other dark motivations that you've kind of? Well,
I can speak to a statement made by Ken Caldera, who is Bill Gates's senior scientist or something. He's like his go-to for science and all things related to, So Ken Caldera, I'm forgetting the title, okay, but Ken Caldera was caught on camera. He used to work for Lawrence Livermore Labs, and he talked about ways that you could subdue an enemy, right? And one of those ways would be to put pathogens in clouds. These are the things they fantasized about as they're talking about these things. And this is like over a decade old, okay? And you could put pathogens in clouds so that it would rain down over a population. So it's not a stretch to think that this is something that they probably have done or do, because it's very effective. You could probably lace the sky with all sorts of things to sedate people, to calm them, to enrage them, whatever the purposes are. We know they've done so many experiments, MK Ultra, all that stuff, right? So I'm not going to put it past them doing it. I try not to claim like, oh, this definitely happened yesterday, but what we all need to start doing is paying attention to how do we feel, what are our symptoms after certain days, and try to not panic either. Like I also go out in whatever the elements are in the world because I have a real strong feeling that your mental health, if you're getting out, you're exercising, you feel joy, you find reasons to laugh each day, you're going to be a lot stronger than people that are like inside cowered in fear, right? You're just better off just live your effing life, get out, get shit done, and refuse to let them impact you, right? Don't let them in, right? I think the worst thing you can do is let them inject you, because that's bypassing your natural, incredible body barriers. You've got your skin is a barrier. You've got your, lung barrier, your gastrointestinal barrier. There's all these amazing barriers in place that will prevent this stuff from really having a direct impact. The vaccinations are number one, the worst thing you can do. I have become completely ex-vax. I am anti-full-blown vax. Don't get any for your pets, your children, yourself, ever again. If you actually take the time to read the package inserts, you're injecting foreign human, animal DNA, and a whole host of toxins that you would never drink. Okay, I'll just leave it there. I rant and post this stuff on my Substack, okay? But I have healthy animals that are, 4 to 5 years old. The puppies, not a darn thing. And I don't care what people want to say. They're inside, outside, in the elements, chewing on dead animals, eating things, and they're healthy as can be. Also,
just on that point, I mean, people need to just stop. And I'm a history major teacher, and a lot of people don't know history in general. And I'm thinking, like, we have an entire community of homeschooling, the church, and it's like virtually no one has vaccinated their kids. And like, and some of them are 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years old. They're all perfectly fine.
I know.
And then I just think of my grandparents. Every time I go to the village in Croatia, we enter the village, and it's like there's a stable at the entrance of the tiny village.
Yeah.
The stable, and always my father says, your grandmother was born in this horse state, like Jesus was born in a stable, was not vaccinated. She lived to be like 80s. My grandpa also, it's like, and then like, they were born in a stable with no C-sections, you said earlier, no big pharma, no injections. They live to their old age. It's all bunk,
It is bunk. And it's so liberating once you finally see it for what it is. The money I used to spend on supplements was outrageous. I had every supplement under the sun, and I thought I was so healthy that I woke up to supplements, right? So, and even, you have to wonder too, like, I am questioning even how much they were pushing ivermectin and HCQ as the alternative. I remember in fact, because they were the voices of reason, they were the ones, like Dr. Gold was one of the early ones I listened to. America's Frontline Doctors, and I thought, well, because she's aware of what they're doing with this scam called COVID, she's on to something. This might be the solution. So I bought it. Now, I didn't take it because I knew that I didn't feel like I was at risk, okay, or my child. But I did get it for my elderly parents. My dad had cancer. My mom had autoimmune disease. But what I'll say is, I convinced them not to get the shots. They couldn't even tell their best friends, like lifelong best friends, because the pressure was so great. They couldn't even tell their friends that they didn't get the shots, but their friends had the shots and they didn't. I spared my whole family, with the exception of my husband, who is, my provider, and he had to do what he had to do. But we've had to deal with that too. But that said, my family was spared, and I'm grateful for that. I don't know why I got into that, but I got the ivermectin for them. So my point is, they're looking for all sorts of ways to get you to do things that will cause harm, I think. And so for me, here's where I am. I keep it really simple. Get it from the earth. Get real sunlight. Get exercise. It'll give you a glow. Skin brush. Take a bath, right? Take a nice bath, skin brush. Get good sleep. Drink clean water. Eat as clean a food as possible. I'm not a saint. We'll go out for Mexican food and we'll eat their, processed beans or whatever, right? But do the best you can in that arena, and you're going to be fine. And I love to say, like, I haven't taken supplements or vitamins for years, and I'm doing great. And we're pretty tough. Our bodies are pretty incredible. So there are some people out there that are like, well, I've been taking ivermectin and I'm doing great. And I said, yeah, but your body's also capable of taking quite a toxic load before it starts to go, So just slow down on the remedies that are being pushed. If there's a sales pitch, I just say proceed with caution, because when there's a market of fear, like they have, like buy your EMF protecting shields, your grounding sheets, buy this and buy that. it's a whole new market. And I find there's a lot of scammers in that arena as well. So I'm of the opinion, less is more, from the earth, keep it simple, stupid. That's where I am.
That's so funny because just, it's maybe been a year or two now, maybe 3, but just in the, recent times, I independently, what you just laid out, that's literally what I came to that exact conclusion. Like exactly what you said. It's mind blowing. And it's like just everything you said, just sleep. Because I noticed when I used to have a day job, or when I had my radio show, when you have stress, I would frequently get sick. But now where I don't have stress and I sleep and no vitamins, sun, it's sunny every day here in Mexico. I go on my roof.
Nice.
For 20, 30 minutes or whatever a day. And then just eating clean food, fruits, vegetables, meat, whole grain, wheat.
Right.
Great. That's it. That is the answer, what you just said. And so that's the problem. I do have a question for you when we close about alt media, but just on the COVID, the geoengineering stuff.
Yeah.
I'm a huge sci-fi fan. And so because it's just fun to visualize alternative worlds and scenarios, but also as you alluded to earlier, the predictive programming, it's a real thing. We how many times do we have to see these TV shows and films and literature that literally come to life? Like at some point you say, this cannot be a coincidence. And then I watched the 2020, first everyone's telling me to watch the British Utopia from 2013. I've got it. I haven't had time yet to see it, but I did watch the remake. So it's like filmed in 2018-19. And then I think it's screened in 2020 during COVID with John Cusack. And I think that was what happened with COVID. If you haven't seen it, but for people who haven't, they should go and watch it. But basically, they want to inject everyone, and they want people to demand the injections. And so what they do is they manufacture a quote pandemic by spraying some sort of thing to make it an appearance of a pandemic. So I think that very much links to the geoengineering scenario you just touched on. So,
Oh no, I'm sorry, cut you off. I'm agreeing with you. There's that, and then I forgot to mention too. We know about DARPA's smart dust, right? And they're using that. Even they want, I believe, they want to track and trace everything down to the cellular level. So, however they can get those trackable, traceable devices or particulate or whatever it is into the system, they're going to probably try to do that as well. And my thought is they know that we're not going to want to take the injections anymore. So they're going to have to come up with other ways to get whatever product or thing they want into our bodies to impact our bodies or our minds into us. So whether it's through the water, the food, the aerosols, there's all sorts of possibilities. I'm not trying to scare people, but you have to just look at the patterns, right? I mean, let me briefly say, and we don't have to get into it too much, but I even covered the genetically modified insects, the mosquitoes, right? And Bill Gates had done a study with the military to look at using mosquitoes as little vaccinators. But then you have them saying, well, we're going to genetically modify these mosquitoes with a self-limiting gene so they can wipe out they're saying they want to reduce the amount of these disease-spreading insects, right? Bogus. And I've covered this before. They did these releases in other countries and nobody put it together. I started noticing when they did these releases in India and Brazil, it was within 2 years that the rate of infection, whatever you want to call it, for the non-virus people out there, they don't exist. I just want to say, whatever it was, the rate of symptoms that led to people getting tested shot up, was it 600%? I think it was 600% now. I'm going to lose that. But it was either 600 or 900, but I believe it's 600%. And I had all the screenshots. I covered this, but I thought this clearly, their plan to reduce disease by getting rid of the disease-spreading insects backfired, but nobody was talking about that. They're still talking about how it's this innovative idea and how they're going to reduce disease everywhere by doing this. And they're continuing to roll out these CRISPR engineered, nobody's talking about CRISPR engineered insects all over. They're in Florida. I think Texas is going to do it. They tried to bring it to California. I got enough of a heads up that I gave people an opportunity to push back and to leave public comment. That's one thing we're not doing enough of. Our voices can make a difference if we have enough time to use our voices. So what bothers me about all these nonprofits out there they give us these calls to action. They're too late. They're like, the call to action is do this. And it's like on the day that it's due, or it's due the next day. And people who have lives, which is all of us, don't have time to write a thoughtful letter or put in a post or figure it out, right? We need it to be really simple for everyone. So that bothers me that we're not getting ample notice, like 2 months in advance, 3 months in advance. Hey, folks, you have a chance to leave a public comment to oppose X, Y, or Z proposition. I put out a notification with some friends of mine, and we contacted every environmental agency we could get our hands on in California. We contacted the press, and we let them know they are proposing to do a pilot release of these mosquitoes in California. And I did quite a few videos. I even put the general manager on the spot on a call, called him out. He was an incompetent buffoon. He's like, oh, ask the EPA, I just do what EPA say. And I'm sorry, but just people like that in charge, right? Doing these experiments that you can't reverse. It just pisses me off to no end. But we had over 5,400 emails of opposition. And guess what? That was enough to make the company withdraw their research application. Now, it doesn't mean they're not going to try again. They will. They're trying to now warm the public up to these sustainable pest management ideas, right? They're like, sustainable pest management. We're looking at these kinds of mosquitoes. And so they're trying to warm up the normies to this idea. So we have to stay. I think the way we can make the best impact and make the biggest difference is in your own backyard. I'm attracted to what's happening around me. There's global issues happening. There's so much I can do there. Not really. But I'm like, how does it trickle down and affect my county? What can I do right here in my county or in my backyard? And if all of us actually just narrowed it down to that, start in your neighborhood. Are there ring cameras everywhere? Do you care about surveillance? Is everybody being asked to share their ring footage with the police? Or are they spraying glyphosate in your county to keep, fires at bay, whatever? You can fight those things in your area. It's much more manageable than trying to, imprison the pedophiles out there that are literally running the show.
Yes, no, that is, I just fully agree. And I've been reading tweets. I mean, I look at it from a biblical worldview, and someone was saying the other day, we were not made to live in such a globalized world with this DARPA, sinister internet. I think we were made to live analog worlds in our immediate physicality. All this information, even the stuff that I do, like, we weren't made to look at so much information at the other end of the planet. We were, I think, made just to enjoy life in our immediate vicinity. So we, first of all, trying to process that information. But as you say, how am I gonna? And this is one thing I learned as well. I was wide-eyed. I signed up to Peace Corps Mongolia. I'm going to go save the Mongols, and once I get there, I'm like, they don't need saving. They can help themselves. And in fact, and then when I later saw that Peace Corps, this was like 20 years ago. Wow, it's 20 years ago. That at that time it cost $35,000 per American, per volunteer of American taxpayer money to finance one volunteer. And then there were some ex-volunteers that discovered this, and they thought, like, what a waste of money. Because in a place like Mongolia, where it's a low cost of living and all that, with 35,000, the locals using that could go, 1,000 times more. And so they started an NGO in Africa, and they were able to do something similar at a much lower cost. But anyways, I'm going on a rant here. My point was, I wanted to, and I think they will. I think their best path of entry with these toxins or whatever they're doing to us, I think, is still physical injection.
Me too. Yeah.
And just right now in Mexico, they lied again. Measles everywhere. The schools had to do a mandatory month-long face masks again. And they were actually sending in Mexican health government workers to schools to track down the kids who were either not vaccinated or didn't have their immunization card wasn't up to date. So they were hunting them down to inject them with measles, and then there was like tuberculosis. They're just making stuff up at this point. They measles, and then they said, oh, tuberculosis also, and it's just kind of like they're just making it up and setting up checkpoint modules for everyone to get injected. So I think, and then we have the digital ID stuff, and then they're going to digital pass. So I want to get your thought on that. Where they'll mandate. That was the case during COVID. You couldn't travel, and this was before COVID. I remember. I think I was in Croatia in the summer of 2019. So just months before, and I'm telling my family, I'm like, look, the EU actually has a plan, a schedule to bring in a vaccine, digital passport for the EU. And so now imagine they merge that with, the digital payments, your digital ID, your digital passport. You can't move now. And so and I've seen you mention on podcasts, 15-minute city and all this stuff. I was shocked to discover when I came back I was living in Kazakhstan from 2017 to 2020, and I came back here to Mexico. My city's a 15-minute city. It's a resilient city financed by the Rockefeller Foundation. Officially. And so what are your thoughts on some of this? I call it algocracy, technocracy, smart city stuff. Basically, they want to put us into electronic concentration camps.
It's so layered. Yeah, I started looking into this. Alison Hobber McDowell was somebody early on. Someone introduced her to me, I think, because we were looking at what I noticed. So I got into this exploration because what they started doing was they put all the kids, right? We were in regular school at the time. They put all the kids on Zoom classroom, right? They were giving everybody laptops. Then we all stopped school for the summer finally, right? Because this is when it was in 2020 that we relocated. We were on Zoom to finish out kindergarten, and then we had plans to go to another little outdoor school. In many public schools, I started learning. So, oh God, we could talk for hours and hours. I'll try to simplify. I learned that in many public schools, which I finally pulled out of, that they were rolling out these digital health passes. So the daily pass was at the Los Angeles Unified School District, a lot of schools. The Long Beach Unified School District used a platform called Color, which is formerly Color Genomics, and the NIH is involved with Color. And so it was like getting these students to give their daily check-ins. How are your symptoms? What were your test results? And so I was very outspoken. If you go back to my oldest videos on BitChute, I was warning people from the get-go, don't do these platforms. And then ClearPass was another one that they used. For kids who wanted to play sports, sign up for the ClearPass. Well, now you see ClearPass in airports, right? And then I discovered that there was a partnership. It was called the Secure Identity Alliance. And this is like this global partnership. And DARPA's involved as well. It was like ID for all or something. And it's been years now since I looked into it. By the way, I download so much information. I have to sometimes put it down, put the links, write it out, and then I can sleep because I can't retain it all. But it was Idemia and Thales or Thales. I will never figure that out because I read everything, okay? And these two had partnered, and there was a bunch of other companies that they were partnered with under these categories, but they were the ones really rolling out all of these digital facial recognition, iris scan, your gait. How can we identify people? How can we provide seamless, contactless transactions? How can we make sure that, and that was what they were doing. They were like, there's a cash shortage, remember? So contactless payments only because of COVID. It was like all the little steps I started to see.
And just to add on that, I've had on the podcast multiple times, John Kleizek, who's an expert when it comes to the education space and all these technologies, how they're creating this social credit system in education.
Minga. And Minga, that's literally a social credit. Like you have timed bathroom visits. If you go to the events and if you're a good little student, you get more points and you get to see everybody else's ranking. This is in public schools right now. It's in our public schools out here. I'm sorry, I get excited. I couldn't believe it was in our remote mountain community that our schools used Minga. I about dropped a load. I was like, what? Because I know it's in the bigger schools, but it's literally everywhere. They get sucked into everything.
It's everywhere. Actually, just this morning, I shared it. Alex Newman, who's been on the podcast, he just shared latest news just on this, how education is being flooded with all of these apps. I will mention that Alison McDowell has been on the podcast, but she's been this way with many people. I respect her work, but for no reason, out of the blue, someone on X was commenting with me and her, and she just calls me a dumbass and blocks me. And I'm like, thanks, Allison. I guess, I always like that, but, she's. I
don't follow her anymore. All I know is that I think she had like digital serfdom, like an article on like the Panopticoin and the digital twin. And I remember it was like beyond my comprehension at the time, but I thought, wow, she's onto something. And, and we see it now, like you can bet and bank on catastrophes, right? There's catastrophe bonds. You can bet and bank on
Polymarket, which is a DARPA project. It's like, what is not DARPA anymore? And I just wanted to add, because you were talking about the schools, and in 2020, I some of my fellow foreign teachers were like normies. So I'm like, oh, we're just going to stay here. And I'm like, I was afraid I'd never leave Kazakhstan ever again because you wouldn't be able to board a plane without being injected. I've never taken a PCR test. So no PCR test, no injection. So I'm not playing this game. And there was a small window, you know, our flights were canceled in March of 2020. Our second flight was canceled in June of 2020. And then, you know, we keep pushing. And then they had a special series of routes for internationals outside of Kazakhstan, summer of 2020. I'm like, we did. It took us like 5 days to get back to Mexico. And then that last year until 2021, I remote taught from here, exactly where I'm sitting, to the school in Kazakhstan through Microsoft Teams or whatever it was. But then I heard that last school year, some of the folks had, you know, stayed behind, the foreigners. And they, at the entrance of the school, they put up tablets for facial recognition to which would determine based on their, you know, regulations whether the turnstile would open or not. You know, do you have your vax certificate or, you know, thermal? And I'm like, and I said in March of 2020, I was in Spiros Skouras's. He had a big alternative media channel. He was deplatformed twice and just gave up. But I told him, COVID was about rolling out global algocracy. And I think everything we're just discussing, that was the point. And now we're on to phase 2. I've been saying that what's happening in Iran now is the next phase, because now you're seeing all across the planet, Asia, no more fuel. There's no fuel, and they're telling people stay home. There's no fuel, so stay home. And now the food is going to get hit. Fertilizers, plants, so there's no fuel, no fertilizer. And you literally you can't leave the house, just like COVID, because there's no gas. And if you're living spread out like many of us are, you can't go anywhere.
I know. It's why aren't more people up in arms and angry? That's where I'm like, I have some days where I feel like, man, I'm on this ride and we are going down. Like this ship is right, because not enough people see what's happening. And it's just sadly, and I've been saying this forever, I know it has to come to their front door before they wake up, right? It's just going to have to smack them really hard. It's going to have to hit them where it hurts. And right now, they still have their sports. They have enough to get by. They can buy cheaper meals if they need to, you know, for their budget constraints. But it hasn't really hit them in a personal way yet, which is really a shame, because we're all going to have to, those of us that are aware of what's happening, you can see it so obviously, right? The camera rollouts, your safety and your security, and here, check this, do this, and it's fingerprinting and all these things. And yeah, it's quite a trip. It's challenging, that's for sure. I've talked to my friends about it. I still, we're like, we're screwed. But I'm not giving up on it yet. I feel like, as I said to you earlier, you know, I've got puppies now in my life that bring us a lot of joy. I decided after years of just like agonizing over my research and looking at all the horrors in the world, I recognized finally, wow, there's a lot I really can't change. There's some things I can, right? And I'm going to tackle what I can. I'm going to keep sharing information that I can that matters to me to reach people. But then I also have to live my life too. And so I have to focus on making sure I have a good season in my garden. I have to make sure my chickens are healthy so that if I can't get to the store for some reason, I can't bike to a store or whatever, I have eggs at least coming in. I've got maybe something growing. I'm seed saving now, right? So, and I've been trying to help people, like, you know, start a pot of herbs, just start something, a small project, and build on that, because, you know, I still don't consider myself a great gardener. I put seeds in the ground and I hope for the best. I water them and I watch them, and I'm not, you know, they're not spaced correctly, but I'm trying, I'm out there doing it, right? And sometimes I have an excellent year and everything's exploding. And sometimes, like this last year, was just not a great year. But also my confrontation was so big, and there was a lot of attention and discussions and interviews and stuff. And then, yeah, there's a lot going on. Anyway.
Yeah, and I think it comes back, you know, what you said earlier about being healthy. One of my past guests cited Teddy Roosevelt: do what you can with what you got, where you're at. That's it. You don't need courses, webinars. It's that simple. I do want to ask you, you know, after all the Convid research, the geoengineering,
Mhm.
Do you have any sort of thoughts as to the big picture? Like my view is basically that there's this globalist class, international.
Yeah.
They have their octopus feelers in every nation. That's obvious by now.
Yes.
From Russia, China, EU, Latin America, Mexico, US. We only have one party in every country. There's no more parties, left, right. It's, and anywhere you look, it's just one uniparty. And
Totally.
they're establishing a global government that's going to be, digital, technocratic, and then once they get there, we've seen history just time and time again. The 20th century, I always talk about R.J. Rummel, I think it was, who coined it democide. The number one cause of death in the 20th century was death by government. And so, do you have any sort of big picture take as to what, New World Order, Great Reset? What do you think at the end of the day? What's the plan?
The cyber polygon exercise that the World Economic Forum did, Klaus Schwab, and where they will have it so fine-tuned that it'll just take an algorithm to determine that you are an outlier and to cut you off. And that algorithm that belongs to you will be linked to your home, your smart meter, and everything else. So they can put the squeeze on you without even having a real human make that decision. I think that's where it's going. Sounds scary, but I did a video on Idemia and the Secure Identity Alliance. It'll all be seamless. You won't even need to come into contact with people. If you want to travel, you'll walk through an airport and get on a plane because your face and your gait will register you with your records and your history and your profile, and you'll be good to fly. You won't even need to show your passport anymore. That's where it's going. I've been seeing the trends. I've been watching. I remember having panic attacks watching all the cameras roll out everywhere. And then when I travel, and I still travel, I go to Europe, and I saw they had the same 6-foot distancing dots as we talked about. It's a global thing. They literally, it was a global rollout of plexiglass, dots, masks, and fear messaging, right? So they are moving us in that direction, and they'll do it with fear. They'll do it with pandemics. They'll do it with false flags and explosions. As I said, I learned about 9/11. They are going to find a way to manufacture the masses, to manufacture our consent for more war and more destruction and more surveillance for our safety. And I think we're outnumbered, sadly.
Yeah, I feel the same way. My other question is, I always ask my guests this. So I agree with you. I agree with your layout assessment. The question is, just the recent example here in Mexico, we have 3 months to register our phones with an identity document. 10%,
Really?
yeah, or they shut it off. And 10% of Mexicans, I think we're 120, 130 million people. Only like 10% have done it. And then you see them. They've been working endlessly for decades to do all of this.
Yeah.
And then there's issues with the technology, with the energy, with the infrastructure. They in Mexico they tried to do push the cashless. So they on your app, all the bank apps did it. Use Cody, the cashless payment. Slow uptick. Then they rebranded it to, I think it's called Dimi now. So that just shows you that they're pushing up the mountain to get us into this farm. And I've had a number of guests say, I look at it biblically and secularly.
Yeah.
If you look at it from the Bible perspective, and I think we need to remind ourselves this often, sometimes I forget. Jesus wins, God wins, the devil fails miserably. So God wins in the end, that's for sure. But even if you look at it secularly, I've had on Jacob Nordengard, who's great, his books, a Swedish researcher. This Tower of Babel that they're building, it's too complex. Like you look at systems theory, too many inputs and variables, and the energy that's required, even from a secular perspective, it's going to collapse. It's just not sustainable. Do you have any thought on that?
Yeah. I want to say, you just reminded me of something. So I had a moment here when I just said to you, I think we're going down with the ship. If I felt that way all the time, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing right now, right? I'm still going through documents. I'm still doing Public Records Act requests. I will say that, let me give a positive example first, because I want to say, I don't want to be too Debbie Downer here, because actually the truth is, the reason I keep going is because I'm never going to quit. Sharing what I can and trying to wake people up, because there have been some ripple effects, right? As we talked about, geoengineering is suddenly now a topic on the table that normies can talk about, right? Finally, because it's out there in the news. we were able to, the flock cameras that have been rolling out everywhere, which is surveillance all the time, and building a profile in your car and your travel, people are now starting to fight back. And counties and cities are starting to say, well, we're not going to do flock anymore. We're going to cancel our partnerships. So there are wins like that. There are small wins like that are happening that are very hopeful. And so when you say it's maybe too complex, they won't be able to do it, we have to keep creating a culture of resistance. We have to keep if we have been quiet about this in our homes and we're not talking to people outside of this little bubble that we're in right here, we all can talk to each other online and we all feel the same way, but we need to reach out to strangers. If you're not going out and talking to strangers and people that you meet on the street or regular folks and just planting seeds, please start doing that, because I have seen positive things come from public pushback, and there is still hope. And I think that's why I keep pushing, though there are days that I feel like it's hopeless. So wait, so your question again, though, or comment was, do you feel like it's too complicated? You're saying biblical times.
Just like structurally, in terms of infrastructure, to build out this system globally, as that they're attempting, because then you have energy stuff, and then you have as well the pollution that all of this energy use causes, because they need oil, they need I'm a fan of nuclear energy, but in building all of these massive data centers that require so much energy, and then there's toxicity as a result. I don't think how many satellites they need. I've got a Starlink, whatever, but it's like, that system cannot go in perpetuity, because
you're right.
So energy hungry, and humans are also have a lot of ingenuity, and so I'm just my thought. They're having the time of their life trying to implement it, I think.
Yeah, I still. So, couple thoughts. Right now, for the last year, they have been upping their aerial surveillance. They're documenting the land. They're using some sort of magnetic means to measure and gauge what's beneath the land. Okay, so we have aircraft going all the time, tight lines, because what they're doing is they're looking for minerals. Why? To power their chips, to power whatever they need to keep things moving, right? They're going to take this all the way to the bitter end. They will trash and exploit and strip and take all that they can to achieve their goals. They don't care if they're wiping out nature or people, because frankly, as you probably are aware, we are the useless eaters to many of the ones that are really running the show, right? They don't need us here. They need a few to kind of serve their needs. But so they're not going to stop. I've accepted that I'm on this journey. I don't know where it's going to go. The only issue I take when I have certain peers in my life that'll say God wins. What I feel is, great, God wins. I'm not going to act like I'm not going to act like that's the ending, because what motivates me is that we are here and now, and we need to step up and take a role in this life that we are living. Because if we're waiting for a savior, whether it's a politician or a lawyer or a messiah, I don't care what it is that you think is coming, you better get out there and get active and stand up for this place, because we make this place. We make it, or we give them consent to strip it and abuse us and rape us, or we don't. And your silence is implied consent. So I really want people to feel like we have to be in this fight, whether you say you're putting on God's armor or however you're going to do it. We've got to do more, because some of the people that have said to me, well, God wins. They're living comfortably. They couldn't be bothered by the stuff. They have comment on it, of course, but they're not really doing all that much. They're not making any calls. They're not really speaking to any strangers. They're not putting themselves out there, right? And I personally feel like we need to be motivated to do a little bit more. And might you be motivated if you didn't think someone was coming or winning in the end? I don't know what the truth is anymore. I'll say that I was raised without any religion, so I didn't get it. I saw churches pushing the COVID shot. There were so many churches that were like, God wants you to take the shot. And I was like, wow, so what I'll say is I have gone on a spiritual journey. So I was raised without any religion. My dad's a former Catholic. My mom's Episcopalian. I grew up a non-believer. Okay. I was told religions are meant to control and keep people in fear. If you keep people in fear of hell, they're going to behave a certain way so they can get into the better spot. Right. So And I still think, and there's a lot of exploitation happening in churches, right? I think the Vatican looks absolutely
Well,
evil.
Jesus himself, I'm a former Catholic and Christian,
Yeah.
but Jesus himself ad nauseum said there's going to be false churches and false
Yes.
teachers.
Yeah. And put your faith in no man, right? I mean, wasn't that also it too? So I think I have an advantage in a way because I didn't grow up with my head in any particular story or book or belief system. Other than I just didn't believe in anything. I didn't do anything special because I just didn't really believe in any religion. I believe that, we're here and this is kind of interesting and we don't know why we're here, and then one day you die, right? So let's make the best of it. And part of the thing that I like to say is I'm not afraid of death because I accept that that's just a normal part of you live and then you die and you'll go back into the ground and become compost or fertilizer for some other plant, right? That's kind of, and I accept that. I don't have the desire to live for eternity, frankly. So for me, I'm coming from a perspective of I'm not looking to please any higher power. I'm not looking to get in good on the good side of it. I'm just trying to be present in this incredible, beautiful place that I live, where there is a relationship between everything, the bees, the flowers, the hummingbirds. I am reveling. My church is my backyard. It is bird and bee paradise. Wildlife surrounds me, right? When I grow my own food, that is God for me, right? That's source for me, right? It's that kind of connection. So I have some friends that are like, well, I go to church occasionally and God wins. And so we're just going to give it up to God. And I just think it's a cop out. That's kind of my feeling. I have to say that.
Oh, I mean, I think again, that's half the equation.
Yeah.
So again, I'm agreeing with you. My view is that,
Yeah.
as the Bible explains, God, the second coming, Jesus wins. But
Yeah.
it also says to be peacemakers, to do good,
Yes.
and that's why we have to be. And again, quoting Teddy Roosevelt, become a man or woman.
Yes.
A man in the arena.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't live my life as
Yes.
as a spectator and just sitting there. I would get bored. I'm like,
Yeah.
That was one of the reasons that drove me to the Bible. Actually, I've told the story when I was I'd work. I went to high school in the U.S. Half my high school, school and university full time and working full time. That's the immigrant middle blue collar work ethic. And I'd have a pile of money. We'd go all summer to the beach in Croatia and just chasing women and drinking.
Yeah.
I got so bored.
Yeah.
I got so bored that I opened the Bible and read the whole thing. I'm like, there's got to be something more, because that's like animal level, just eating, sleeping, pooping, mating.
Yes.
And it's
You're
like that. What, that's boring. And so you got to become a man or woman in the arena.
Yes.
And so, before letting you go.
Well, can I say this though too? In 2020, I realized. So I also learned about Freemasonry, and I learned about who's calling the shots here, right? And when I learned that Erasmus Darwin was a 33-degree Freemason and Charles Darwin was as well, I went, oh. So I also watched What on Earth Happened, which people might roll their eyes or not, but it just completely blew my mind wide open. So what I'll say is I'm on a spiritual journey. I am not one, though, I'm not going to rush into this because, as you know, the Scofield Bible was influenced by Zionism, right? So everyone's like, oh, we have to support this militarized state, Rothschild state Israel to fulfill the biblical stories. That's why I hesitate to just say, oh, yeah, I'm all in on this book written by man and this preacher who's interpreted the Bible in a certain way. I feel like what's going to happen for me is I'm going to learn as I need to learn, right? But it is, I'm very aware that this is actually a spiritual battle too. And there are components to what's happening that I'm very receptive to, and I've wondered too, like, are these, so there's the theory that, it's fallen angels and these are offspring of the Nephilim, right? And that these people are just, and I've even looked at, there's some churches that are like Luciferian churches, and they're trying to create space within their bodies to let in demons to fight with God or something. So, I mean, there's some crazy shit that I'm opening up to, and I don't know what the truth is because I know there's manipulation everywhere. So I'm literally just feeling it. I'm having my own conversation, in my own ways. Like there are times that I felt that I was being communicated with, with looking at the sky and just feeling a sense of something, where I went, there's more. There is so much more to this. And so anyway, I don't know why I went on that tangent too, but I just wanted to say, like, I don't completely reject that notion of, but I think we need to be engaged. We have to be engaged. And I liked when my friend said we need to put on God's armor and stand up and be warriors for what's right. And I totally agree. I mean, look at we're not going to get any justice with the Epstein files or COVID. Nobody's been arrested. It's such a joke. So when are we going to take back when are we going to stand up and fight for children? When are we going to, even with the COVID mitigation strategies, right? All that COVID crap. I fought for my child. I fought for other people's children not to have to suffocate themselves all day, sit behind plexiglass and shove swabs up their noses, and not to get the shots. I guess the question I'd like to ask people to ask themselves is this: how are you showing up each day in this fight? Are you just sharing information on Twitter or Facebook on the Rothschild platform? Or can we do more? I think so. And don't wait for anyone, because if we wait for someone like the people that got sucked into the Q movement, they were like, don't worry, plans are happening behind the scenes, everybody. Just sit back and eat your popcorn. When I hear somebody say that, get them out of your life. Block, mute, delete. They are leading you astray. It is on us to be the change and to make the different change that we wish to see. It's just as simple as that. If we don't like something, go out and do something about it. And I've done that in multiple ways with multiple topics. And I have that on my Substack because I don't want to take too long here. I know you're like, let me go. Let me wrap.
No, we don't have that time. Just want to ask you, because just on that segue, that was my last question, where you had a QAnon, one of my recent guests, Brad Miller, who does great work. He called, we talk about BRICS multipolarity. Putin is going to save us, Xi Jinping, and that's like QAnon International, or some people call it Xenon. And then Trump, RFK Jr., Tulsi, they've all completely sold out. Like, where you go from RFK, and I think you said you worked for CHD for a while. I've donated to them in the past, and they've done some good work, and I think they still do separately. But RFK was like, when I get in, I'm going to eliminate glyphosate. And I listened to him on Joe Rogan. He's like, no, we need to keep glyphosate. And then Tulsi's like, you could literally find the tweets from Trump 10 years ago. I'm retweeting them today. Everyone's retweeting them. He's like, no war with Iran that's going to destroy the Middle East and the Strait of Hormuz. And now he's literally doing it. And then Tulsi, same thing. And now she's literally doing it. Like, everyone flips the 180. So just your thoughts on that, but not just the political space, but the alternative media space.
Yeah.
I've been calling this for years, and it's just increasingly becoming the case that around us, there's just so many bad actors. So just any thoughts on that? Yeah.
Well, one thing I want to say is one of the reasons I document like I do, I started making videos because I needed to express myself and reach people that I couldn't reach in my backyard, right? So I started just talking about stuff because I wanted to get information out there for whoever was ready to receive it. This is why you have to preserve these things. You have to document. You have to screenshot these old statements. You have to download and save documents. And you'll find files are missing, websites are missing. They're gone after a certain amount of time. Here's what they do. They screw a population over with their joke of a pandemic or a false flag or an explosion or a demolition, whatever it is. And then the truth comes out when it's the next generation's turn. And they're already preoccupied with some new manufactured chaos. And so they don't care enough to get justice for the old stuff that happened when they were in their youth, right? They're just worried about the problems they're facing today. This is the pattern over and over and over. And this is why I get so freaking frustrated, is because we still need to have arrests for what happened in 2020. We still don't have justice for what happened in 2001, right? There's no real truth there. We can talk about it and joke about it, and people are like Building 7, and we all kind of get the joke. But we need some real, it's never going to happen. I have no confidence or trust or faith in our system. I think all of them, at that level of decision making, you are compromised, and you are serving the bad guys, and you are merely a puppet. And I have no respect anymore for that authority. None. And none of us should. And what I would wish for everyone is that they cut them off financially. You stop paying taxes if you can, find a way. They lied to you. If you need to lie to get by, then lie to get by. That's what I feel too. Protect your family. Okay. Protect yourselves. Get yourself armed and get some home defense, because at the very end of the day, when there's so much shit going so wrong, that I think to myself, at least I have my own space and I can defend it. And if they come to my door and say, well, we have a problem with your social media posts, I'll say, bye-bye now. Get off my front porch. Leave me alone, right? I'm going to defend my home and my family, and that's it. I'm not going to go out looking for trouble. But, that's kind of where, because it's just so bad. And let me just remember. So I said preserve history. That's important because we need to show our children the lies that we were told. And we need to remember because we forget, right? We keep repeating the same stupidity over and over and over. And then what was the other thing you said? What do you think about, being bad actors? Yeah, they all are. Oh, yeah. And let me go back
in the podcasting alternative media space also.
Yeah. Well, I think, there's a lot of, here's my thought now is that if you have a certain number of subscribers and you're out there, you're there for a reason. You've been elevated for a reason because I'll find there's some incredible truthers out there that have very, very few subscribers. And they've been dropping dirt for many, many years, but they don't have the platform, right? So, and also, we get into this like, controlled op. I mean, I've done that too. I will say though, I think Bobby's part of the big bloodline family. And I call him Bobby. That's what everybody called him. I was a volunteer for many years for them. I thought he was like a god. I was like, oh my God, he's speaking so much truth. He's helped, that he understands the vaccine issue. He talked about how they're spraying aluminum in our skies. I thought he was the real, the candidate, right? I thought he's the guy. And then he did what I saw Bernie Sanders do, because I'm a former progressive liberal, okay? Bernie Sanders was like, rah, rah. What he did was he reined in all the people that were sick of the duopoly, and he recharged the voter base, and he brought them all in like he was going to do something different. And then he handed it off to So he did that to us twice. And this is when I was still thinking that we could make a difference with our vote. I no longer think we can. I think the whole system is broken. It just needs to be rejected and ignored. And we'll figure it out as we go. I actually don't know what the solution would be. Sometimes I feel like I want just a nasty revolution, just flat level their symbolic structures. And let's just figure this out in our neighborhoods. But that's clearly not going to be the way we move forward here. But yeah, you got to withdraw from the system in the ways that you can. Get to know people that you trust, trade food, trade services, take care of each other. I don't know what else to do. I mean, it's you can't escape it. You have to learn to navigate it too. I don't want my son to be a hermit. So we've had the best conversations about the media lies. The movies are grooming you. Look at this placement here. Look at this. Did you see this? Did you see this? We've talked about all the stuff. And it's a weird, I think back to my childhood, it was like blissful and oblivious and really fun. And my child is in this world now where now you have Trump talking about taking Cuba. Just like, we're going to take Cuba.
That's the age-old plan of the technate. And
so it's just, here we are. We're learning about pedophilia and sacrifice and ritual abuse. And we're learning about MK Ultra. And we're learning about all the lies we've been told. And this is a very interesting time to be alive. And I've just accepted I'm on this ride. And I don't know where it's going, but I'm not afraid of death. And I will die defending myself and my family. And I'm okay with that. I will have lived true to myself. That's all I want to do. That's what matters to me. And something inside me drives me. And whether it is spirit or whatever you want to call it, whatever it is, I am motivated and driven to look for the truth, to speak the truth, the truth that I understand, because sometimes you learn that you were wrong, right? And that's that's doing the best I can do.
We've covered the waterfront. You've answered my questions on what to do, how to survive. We've covered everything, and I like what you said. I'm going to stress that this culture of resistance.
Yeah.
Any final thought for us, as well as all of your links will be in the description. But any final thought, as well as best places for people to go to. Find you.
Well, find me on Substack. You can check my posts. You can go through and just look at some of the titles and see what I cover, because I cover carbon capture scams in my research. I cover the vaccines. I've talked about the genetically modified mosquitoes, my spider silk that fell from the sky samples. I'm a documenter. I like to share with as many people as I can what I'm finding. What I would say is I'm finding more and more that the online world is really toxic. It can be a fantastic tool for learning, but I have now started tuning out I'm not following everything anymore, because I'm like, it's the same old shit, just repackaged differently, right? It's a new story, but it's the same pattern of crap, right? The same bad players, the same bad lies. And so we do need to talk to each other in person. We have to reach out and try to have conversations with others. I went to recently a liberal meeting in town, because they're all like the no kings, they're no kings, and they're like, Trump's a pedophile. I'm like, well, Hillary's a pedophile too. She's involved in trafficking too. You missed the pedestophiles, I guess, didn't you? And Anthony Weiner's laptop. So I am trying to find the common ground that we might share. And my thought recently is that, in fact, the first time I was censored, sorry, I'll make this sort of quick, was years ago, before Convid. It was speaking up about Israel's abuse of Palestinians. Kicked off of Twitter 3 times, 3 different accounts. Never tried to get back on again. Finally, I was done, right? And only recently, after my pilot confrontation went viral, my husband's like, you should really be on Twitter. That's where you can like influence people. So I'm so anal about data these days that I was like, well, okay. I did it through a friend's phone number. So every time I had to log in, it was like a 2-factor. She had to like send me the code and I had to enter, stupid. So I barely go on Twitter. I'm just on Substack. It makes my life easier. But, oh shoot, where was I? I was saying we have to talk to people. We have to talk to people. Oh yeah. So I went to this liberal meeting and I was trying to find common ground. There's not a lot there, sadly, but we have to try to bridge this gap somehow and let them know, like, hey, you're concerned about the same things we are, in the sense of like there's so many things we can connect on, not everything, but like find the ways you can connect, because I think what the left does understand is that the oligarchy, the billionaire class, not a good class. And we know this too. I think in the conservative space, I think we understand that as well. Like, it's billionaires running the show, right? And there's particular people that are appointed or put into these positions or doing the military's dirty work, right? So anyway, and also find a reason to laugh every day. Get your hands in the dirt. And if you don't have space for a garden, get together with people and start a community garden, start growing food. People are like, well, what about the chemtrails? I'm like, it's the food I grow in my backyard is still better than the supermarket food that took a week and a half to get to the supermarket before it sat for another week before you picked it. So just grow your own damn food. It's so much better. Remember, you have the natural body barriers. If you stop getting the injections, which bypasses all of those barriers, including your blood-brain barrier with the polysorbate 80, your body is incredible. Take good care of it. Laugh, get sun, get exercise, skin brush, and do a little more each day, and give yourself rest if you need it as well.
Excellent advice. And I just, when you're talking about the lefties, I have the same issue when I see them online saying Trump is a bad man. I'm like, I agree, yes.
Yeah.
But not for the reasons that you think. Yeah. He's just the mask for this oligarchy. And so so really great chatting with you. Your links are in the description so people can follow your Substack, your BitChute. I did find your X account, so I followed you on X as well. And so keep up the great work, and thanks for coming on Geopolitics and Empire.
Herboye, yeah? I got it. Okay. Thank you, Herboye. It was a pleasure connecting with you today. And I look forward to watching more of your interviews too. So thanks so much for having me.